This week, Chris is going to talk about how to turn one of the young trees into a green screen, perfect for your garden for privacy, shelter, or simply as a beautiful focal point. He'll show you what to do when your bare trees show up early and you're not quite ready. And later on, he'll demonstrate how to prune pear trees for bigger fruit.
Come on. Okay, so one of the pruning techniques, just move that one out of the way a bit so it's a bit easier to see, that we do is, particularly with fruit trees, but it can be done with other trees as well, is a process called pleaching. Pleaching basically is keeping a tree to a flat shape, and it means that where you may not have room for a big tree that may have a 10-foot head on it in width and girth, you can actually keep it against the fence or against the wall by trimming it annually and keeping it to size and shape. So this one, for example, overall width is probably no more than about 30 to 40 centimetres in width, but we've got a span of approximately 6 foot with this tree. An example behind you, there's a line of pleached hornbeam trees. Again, we've allowed the heads with those to develop slightly more, but you've got a clear stem of approximately 1 metre at the base. So in a garden situation, that would allow you then to have low growing perennials and grasses and flowers underneath. But again, you've got almost a stilted hedge or hedge on stilts, which gives you screening and green cover. The top obviously hasn't been done yet with that one, but again, you can see with the sides where we've been shaping those to the box shape. We grow up a tree and then we take out side branches and we try and keep them fairly evenly spaced, roughly about 12 or 18 inches apart. With a fruit tree particularly, what you're trying to do is to create open growth that's going to produce flowering buds for next spring. If you left this would become a big tree, but we've been controlling it, and if you're looking at the top here, you can see where originally it had put on an extra 2 foot 1 year. So this is an old cut here with the heel where we've cut it back hard, and I've taken the 2 branches across for the sideways growth. So you've now got your new bare root trees. You've dunked it in water so it's had a good soak for a good half an hour. If you're not now ready to plant them straight away, then a handy tip that we use quite a lot on the nursery, which is going to give you plenty of time to be able to get them replanted into the final position, is simply to dig a hole. Because we've just looked at the roots, we know roughly how big that hole needs to be. Not overly deep. This isn't a permanent planting. This is just temporarily healing them in. So we've just dug a shallow hole and we're just going to place our root ball carefully back into the centre and then just pull the soil back around just to cover the roots. The key thing is making sure that you're at the right level so that the stem and the roots are covered and not the stem. The bag will keep the roots moist for while they're being transported, but if they were just left in the bag, those roots could become frosted if they're left outside. And then very, very gently, just very lightly compact them into place. And those bare root trees will now sit there quite happily for a couple of weeks. I will come back in a minute and give them a good watering in, but they will sit there quite happily for several weeks until you're actually ready to plant. So if your delivery arrives and you're not ready to plant it straight away, simply by healing them in, which is a process I've just done there. If you've got a ready dug trench, then it's ideal. But again, just temporarily healing them in, and those plants will keep, because they're dormant, for several weeks without any problems whatsoever. And then when you're ready, they can be re-lifted, re-soaked. Always, when you take the bare root out of the ground, use a bag to cover the roots to stop the wind from drying them out. And once they're planted again, even if it's a wet day, I'd still give them a good drink to rehydrate them again once they're in the ground. And it's the same process for trees as it would be for hedging plants that we've just got in the bundle there. One of the key things to make sure when you're doing a temporary healing in is that the hedging plants or the trees that you're healing in are healed in at the same level. So we want to cover the roots in that bundle and make sure that they're planted at the same level in the ground. Even though this is only temporary, it may only be for a few days, but it's still vital to make sure the roots have got a coating of soil on them, but they're not burying the stems. If you've done it in that way, then, as I say, these will sit, the soil will protect them from frost, and these will sit quite happily for several weeks until you're ready to finally plant them out. Now we're moving towards December and we've had some really nice cold weather this last week. Is a good time for taking off any dead, diseased and damaged growth, and also shortening back this year's growth, which will put the energy then into setting flower buds for lower down. So for example, this is a branch at the front here that's been damaged, and it's also starting to come forwards a little bit. So I'm going to take that just above a bud and remove that. And then I think probably, having done that, I'm going to take that a little bit lower, basically just to allow a little bit of space, and then I'm still leaving my fruiting growth, just taking that back to 1, 2, 3 buds. These little spurs, which would be last year's where it was shortened back last year, these should flower then next spring and produce blossom and then fruit. So that's last year's, that's not going to need touching. All I'm doing is shortening back this year's growth. So the flower buds will come on 1 to 2 year growth, and I want to shorten them back to between 3 and 5 buds, basically with an angle cut. And just again, we want air movement. So basically I'm just going to rub out some of these little side shoots with my finger there, or my thumb, sorry, just to allow air to move around those when the leaves and the buds form. Basically, this is this year's growth now that it's put on. If I was to leave that, then it's growing up into the other branches. It's all going to start to rub together and move across in the wind. So I want to shorten these back, and I'm going to shorten all of this year's growth right the way back. Anything that looks as though it's going to go up too high, I'm going to take down. Basically, the key is to try and leave an open structure and allow plenty of air movement. That's really what we want. So anything that I think is going to get too big or grow in the wrong direction, now is the time to get in and trim it. So it's really just a case of reducing and getting everything back to a nice compact size. Always tempting, because if you leave too much on, you'll get a little bit more fruit, but then it's harder to get it back to shape. Can be done, but it's harder work. So if this is done annually, so for example that one there, last year we probably didn't take that back far enough because it's up to the top, so I'm going to be a bit more harder with that. I'm going to take that right down to the bottom, but then that's allowing air movement around this particular branch. I'm just going to shorten that one back as well. So anything that was damaged, again, we want to take off and reduce. Anything that was diseased, again, we'd reduce. I'm probably going to nip you back as well. But the key really is to try and leave some of these flower buds, but not to leave everything. The other thing was shortening the growth. By shortening it, what we're doing is we're sending all the tree's energy into these flower buds, these fat buds here that you can see, rather than the growth being taken and split over. For example, that one that's not been cut, you've probably got 10 buds on there. So you either get 10 very small buds that may develop fruit, but the fruit will be very small. But if I'd be quite hard and take that back to about 3, then all the energy is going into those 3 buds, and that's going to give you a stronger tree and probably a better chance of fruit set and better fruit.